Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host, and happy holidays to all of you. Uh, it's coming right up on New Year's Eve, and I wish you all a wonderful 2025 and celebration tonight, New Year's Eve. And I hope next year is a great year for you all. I got to tell you, there's a lot going on right now in the skies right here at the end of the year. But I also want to thank everyone that's made this show, continue on. I really appreciate all the help that you give. And just watching helps and listening. We have a lot of downloads on our podcast. It's quite amazing compared to a lot of people I talk to, up to 150,000 downloads per month. So I'm really very happy with all those who listen. And anyone can actually send me an email. I don't always get back right away, but I don't really say it too much that you can. That's at martin@podcastufo.com. Also, if you want to sign up for our weekly newsletter, that's right on our website, which is podcastufo.com. Now, I gave Charles a couple of weeks off for doing the blogs, but we still have tons of them on our website if you haven't gone over there and read them. A lot of the blogs, or most of the blogs, eventually come out. I'm not all that good with putting them up, but they come out as an audio blog as well, and that's in the podcast feed. If you want to listen to just the audio, you can listen anywhere. We do run ads on them, but anywhere there's a podcast, you can find Podcast UFO. If you join helping us out on Patreon, I think it's the low level is like $3 a month. You can avoid all those ads that we do run. But anyway, I thought that was necessary to do just with the cost of this show. And I do appreciate all those who participate, help us out. And it's been a great year. And thank you so much. And I'm real excited about our guest tonight. I had Mike Fiorito on, and I probably mispronounced his name, a while back. And I really enjoyed him. And he's got a very interesting take and a book out. And see the T-shirt right here, UFO Symphonic. And if those of you who've heard me say this, I've always wondered about intelligent life out there and if there's music involved. What is, I've pondered things like on this show, like what is the equivalent of the first kiss, the first love, the first new car, and what is the music like? Those are all questions that I've had over the years when I think about what other intelligent life is out there. Music's a universal language, vibration. And anyway, we're bringing in Mike now. Hello,
So
Mike.
great to
Good to
see
see
you.
you again.
Hey,
Yeah,
Martin, thank you so much for having me on. It's always fun,
right.
and I
Yeah.
really enjoy your show.
Yeah, and we've been in touch
Thank you
since the
so
last
much.
time you were on. We've talked a number of times. It's been a real pleasure getting to know you.
Yeah, yeah,
And,
it's wonderful. One of the things about this community is the just the friends I've made, and lots of great people, and it's just been all over the world, right, Martin? I mean, you
right.
know better than anyone.
Yeah. Yep. It's great. It's kind of it's a small niche, but it really, in my opinion, it's hard to say this, but I don't think it should be that small of a niche because I'm really surprised there's in the general public that there's not more curiosity with the possibilities of what may be visiting us. You can't deny that something's going on and has been going on for a long time that we know of, and maybe a lot longer. But I'm just surprised that there's not more curiosity sometimes. When I went
Yeah,
to the last DC hearing, I spoke with a number of family, and hey, did you hear there was a hearing on UAP UFOs in Washington DC? I
yeah,
was there, by the way, and blah blah blah. No, no. What's for dinner?
right.
That's kind of the attitude.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But
Well, I think
anyway,
it's interesting that you say that because I think I had friends over last night, and we started to talk about this, not the book really, but just talk about life in the universe. And it's interesting. It's a lot of people, and I address this in the book, and we'll talk about this, but they're kind of very literal. And the UFO topic is not a literal topic. It is very deliteralized, and I'll talk about what I mean by that. But like you said, you have hearings in Congress, you have forget even the drone stuff because that's very, very confusing. But you have hearings in Congress, you have testimonies from pilots, very trusted observers. You have data of different modalities. You have Michio Kaku saying the burden of proof is on the government, and
Mm.
basically people aren't interested. Um, I think it's just some people by nature are drawn to the topic, and some people are just like, oh yeah, sure, whatever, and just they're not interested in pursuing it further, unless they should have some kind of encounter that forces them to look squarely in the subject, I think.
That's right. And it's kind of a shame that it has to take that. But that's kind of how I got involved. I mean, I just after I saw something that I couldn't explain, it was like, well, I got to know more about this. But
Hmm.
not everyone's like that. I've talked to many people that have had some type of encounter. One of them was an absolutely incredible encounter, and that person in particular said that he could care less.
Right.
And I don't understand that way of thinking, but everyone has different ways of thinking about things.
Yeah, there was one woman, a friend of ours, my wife and I, our friend, and when I was looking up at the sky. We were upstate, and I live in New York City, so we don't get to see, the belly of the Milky Way and just the plenitude of stars. And I just said, "Oh gosh, look at that up there and how vast." And she said, "Oh, that really makes me nervous when you talk that way. Like the vastness of the universe is uncomfortable for her."
I
And I
understand. Yeah.
and I wouldn't want to beat her up about it. It's sort of okay, well, yeah, well, I hear you. Yeah, it's a big, scary kind of we don't know. There's a lot that's unknown, and that's frightening when you really think about it.
And we just think we're floating through the cosmos at I forget how many tens of thousands of miles an hour. And we're
Yeah.
we're unprotected skies basically. So yes, if you look at it that way, it can be very scary. And I'm a fan of listen to astronomy cast a lot, and I had one of the people from that on this show at one time. But he has this term he uses often: the universe is out to kill us. you know there is so many ways that that could happen, but
And
but
it does eventually, by the way.
yeah, oh yeah, I know. Yeah, it will. That's right. The red
I,
giant. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I mean, we're a cork bobbing. It's been said before. It's not mine, but we're just a cork bobbing on a vast ocean, and
Mm,
in our little kind of what we call the world, right? In this little
microcosm.
bedroom,
Yeah.
little tiny thing we call the world, and that's really what I explore, in the book. Is the I go on the premise of when you talked about it, so I should address that what would music be like to a non-human intelligence? I mean, we can be sure there's music. We can be sure because there's music, like you said, it's the universe is made of vibrations. I mean, rocks have vibrations.
Mm,
Everything vibrates. The universe, and I read about this in the book, is crackling with noise. I mean, from the ocean depths and the sounds that are occurring in the ocean, even to the forests and in space. There's just noise everywhere, and some of it is formed. When um, you arrange it, and there's some intention put on it. It sounds like music. Um, so that's why I call the book UFO Symphonic Journeys into Sound, because I discovered we're not just talking about music, we are talking about sound too.
mm.
Sound is an important element in the research I did in the discovery. So I didn't want to just make it only about music. And I could give some examples of that. Would you like me to give some
Yeah,
examples of
sure.
that?
Yeah.
So really what my premise was is so I'd written For All We Know, and I was getting, emails and reach outs from different people. And I had begun, even as that book dropped, I had begun the concept for UFO Symphonic. But the truth is that this book was written in an act of discovery. I didn't know exactly where it was going to go. And in my interactions with people, in my conversations, it changed course, and it added things. What I said to people is The basic ask of people is, if you've had an experience uh, that is inexplicable and involves music, please let me know and we'll discuss your
Hmm.
story. So I didn't trap it down to, I didn't want to tell you what to say. I didn't want to feed the story to you. I wanted you to come to me. So the stories are varied. They're highly varied. They're from musicians. I got stories from scientists around the world. You probably know Massimo Teodorani. Um,
Yes, I know who he is. Uh,
yeah.
I'm wondering if I may have had him on the show with one other person, another scientist. I
Um,
believe I might have.
you probably did. He's done. He's a physicist, an astrophysicist, but has done work on analyzing data, on analyzing like the Hessdalen lights, if I said it correctly, but other work too. He briefly worked with Avi Loeb or his team, um, and he still works on projects where he uses his knowledge of instrumentation making to help analyze data that's anomalous data and to help make sense of it. Um, but he was one person. I talked to another person who is a neurobiologist, and she heard me on a podcast. She reached out to me because I was talking about sound. These are people that are trained in literalization. So I mentioned that word, literalization, to be literal, to use the um, the language of logic. We know, you and I know, that the phenomena, it goes beyond the language of logic. I mean, even physics goes beyond the language of logic when you come down to it. You're when you get down to the subatomic level, you're in, the palace of quarks, which gets very confusing. Um, the uncertainty principle, that you can't, know the direction and the speed of a subatomic particle simultaneously. And the only way you can get measurement is by the only way that you could learn either one of those characteristics is by measuring it, and you're influencing the outcome. So there's a, it that in itself is very mysterious. But let me get back to the point. So this woman who reached out to me, uh, she's a neurobiologist, and she said, I had an experience with sound. She was working with what we call binaural beats. So I don't know if you've heard of that, the Monroe Institute, Robert Monroe, and he created with other people. Binaural beats is, typically use a headset, and you have two frequencies that are occurring, but they're different frequencies. So they're in your head and they create this kind of warble effect. And what happens is you kind of get hypnotized. And this woman was playing with binaural beats. She was doing meditation. So it's interesting. I found these common things. She was doing meditation. She was playing with binaural beats. It was kind of affecting her. She would see colors. She would have changes in her sensory perception. And she said one night she heard this loud sound, like you know, it wasn't like anything she'd ever heard, and a kind of thud in her house. She lives around Chicago. And it was sound that kind of was like music, but it was like almost a jet or something that, zzz, made her house shake and tremble. It was kind of scary.
Hmm.
And she said she had a kind of nerve thing happen down her leg, like her leg kind of got paralyzed or was jolted by this nerve, paralysis or something. Anyway, the next day she talked to her son about this, and her son heard something as well. He heard a loud kind of booming sound or something. She said, and I didn't interpret anything. I took her story. She said, I live near Fermilab. Maybe there was some experiment that happened. I don't know. Maybe it was something else. Maybe it was some, object. As we know, people that have these experiences are often affected by the phenomena. They have,
Hmm.
if they have an encounter, or if the UFO or whatever you want to call it um, comes near them, there could be, uh, effects on them, physiological effects. There could be changes in the like air. This they call it the Oz effect, right?
Hmm.
Um, it could be the electricity starts going haywire. These are very common things. It's even in Close Encounters, right? Where there are these, you know, weird manifestations of in physical reality that are lights flicker, things don't work, things the radio
Hmm.
blares, things like this.
Hmm.
Um, so I had that story, and I weave those stories with my stories as well. Um, and my stories, I would say, are, you know, they may be prosaic, and what I mean is some of the stories aren't as extraordinary as the stories that were told to me. You mentioned you were listening to some medieval or Renaissance music, and
Oh, when we were talking off air, yes. Hmm.
we're talking off air, and you know, one of my favorite uh, composers is Palestrina, who is a Renaissance composer. And I have a kind of a story. I have a story in there. It's my story, and it's just about, I would say, an emotional and a kind of transcendent experience listening. These stories had to be more than I was listening to music, and you know, I was taken somewhere else. I don't mean you know, I went back to childhood, or I remembered when I was married. It couldn't be like that. It had to be something inexplicable, something that you can't really make sense of in, like a dream.
Hmm.
There's a lot of dream language in this book, and I really draw heavily from Jung and you know, ideas of the collective unconscious. I mean, dream. It's interesting, and I read about this in the book, and I'm probably rambling, but that's okay, I'm sure. You know, dream kind of, it presents itself in the robe of duplicity often. You know, like the UFO phenomena. It's a very kind of deliteralized thing. We we see something. Often people say, "I'm not sure if I was dreaming, but it was real." Um, and then maybe there are other things that help them to distinguish it from a pure dream. Not to denigrate what a dream is, but maybe there's a burn mark. Maybe there was something out of place. You know, something that they can say in physical reality that manifested, that made it undeniably something that happened in this realm.
Hmm.
Um, I wrote about another story was uh, a woman who, she was an epidemiologist. So again, you know, someone who, you're like a, that's like a statistician, an epidemiologist. You're doing studies of
Right.
health,
I have a friend that's
and
one. Yeah. Hmm.
yeah. So it's a, you know, it's a rigorous study. It's very quantitative. And she said, and it was very emotional, her story, Leanne. And she said she began, and she was introduced to me by someone else. She said Leanne has a special relationship to music. So she began to kind of experience things through music. So one of the things she experienced is her porch. She said her back porch became a spaceship. She said, and she would, you know, go. She would encounter the visitors, beings. They take her places. Not like this is ended. This still happens. And she would be asked to sing songs for people, and she would sing uh, with the premise that she was healing. And she said, God, I have a terrible voice. She said, so I don't know how this works. But she said that these songs were going to somewhere to help heal. And she was very emotional. And then she had other experiences where she began to relate music to, see, even people. So a song represented, and she would have a constellation of things like a crystal or an object and a song, and she began to create these correspondences uh, with music, and had extraordinary experiences. One of them was, she was it was, I think the song was like a bridge over troubled water,
Hmm.
and she said she was driving and it was torrential rain, downpour. She's driving and she couldn't see where she was going. And there was one place in the song, when you're down and you're feeling,
Yeah.
and then there's a
Mhm.
change in emotional direction of the song.
A
And
bridge.
she,
Yeah.
right, there's a change where it gets uplifted, you know.
Mhm.
And she said she was crying as she's driving to her parents. It's raining. She can't see. And when that lyric, and I don't remember the lyric, she said, "Please tell me where. I don't know where to go," because she was going to have to make a left or right. She said lightning struck her windshield, completely illuminated, like it was just lit up on fire, and she could see the now she could see the sign on the road, turn left.
Uh,
And but it coincided with like that moment of
hmm.
the change in the song and when she asked for it. So,
That's
these
bizarre.
things,
Yeah.
yeah, they were, and the stories could be, highly varied. They could be, someone had a story that is a good friend of mine. He's a New England, born in New England area. He's a Boston Red Sox fan.
Mhm.
We have joking conversations about that. But his partner for many years, she was a fiddle player, a very very talented fiddle player, and she played with really the bluegrass luminaries, Sue
Hmm.
Cunningham. And she played with Peter Rowan, who, by the way, is also from Massachusetts. I know you're not from Massachusetts, but you're from New
From
England,
the area. Mhm.
from the area. And um, he had a story. My friend Frank had a story about Sue. She died young from cancer,
Mm.
and he was telling me, Frank, and there's a lot of emotion in these stories. There's often a lot of grief, and as we know, was John Mack said, sometimes it's grief, it's shock, something that creates ontological shock. Something happens to you. It, could be a near-death experience. It could be the death of another person. It could be an encounter, or as direct as that, but something that shakes you. It kind of cracks your literal mind open and opens that, deliteralizes your mind. And he had Sue passed away, and she had a flute that didn't work. She'd given him. She, of course, all of her belongings went to him. So he's with Peter Rowan, who's a uh, bluegrass legend. I wrote a book about Peter. I've become very close to Peter. And Frank is talking to Peter, telling him about a song he wants to write. And Peter sees the flute. Peter's not a flute player, really. I mean, he plays guitar, plays mandolin, but I guess he can play some flute too. He says, "Can I take a look at that?" And he picks up the flute. Frank's not even thinking about it because he's telling him this story, right? Peter starts to play on the flute. He's looking at Frank and he's not really, it looks like he's not paying attention to him. He's sort of lost in playing, on the flute. And then uh, Peter says, after a few, maybe 10 minutes or something, he says, "Frank, I have the tune. So let's do this now." So Frank pulls out his iPhone because he can't write this down. It's too jarring. Pulls out his iPhone and starts recording it. Peter's composed the tune, the melody. He has the lyrics, and he uses Frank's lyrics for the chorus.
Mm.
They excitedly record the song, and the spirit of Sue is kind of is imbued in this song and in the creation of it. Anyway, they begin to talk about the song. Peter picks the flute back up, but it won't play. It never plays again.
Hmm.
And so this flute kind of came alive, and I know Frank is a beautiful person, and uh, Sue is very special, and their love was very special, what they had together. And she kind of, Frank believes that she kind of spirited that flute to come alive, to come to life and give them a song. And now they have a song that they created together. And I think Peter said he was going to play that song. He was in Ireland recently, and it's a kind of it has that Irish. It's like a British Isle song.
Hmm.
So that's what I mean. The stories were highly varied. I included at the end of that story. Um, there's a book. Well, Dean Radin has a book, and he talks about. There's a. Uh, he's a. He's one of these literal type of people. He's a science writer, and I don't remember his name. And he's a debunker. He debunks certainly the UFO topic. But Dean Radin recounts a story that this guy has, and I don't remember his name. It's in the book. But he says that um, when he and his wife got married, his wife was very close to her uncle who died a long time ago. They were very close, and I think the night of they had got married, they're in their house, and they hear music coming from somewhere, and they don't know where it is. It's coming from somewhere, and they finally look through, I think, the attic, and they discover that there's a radio playing. It's an
Hmm.
older. It's a radio that's never played. It was our uncle's radio. It's
Hmm.
never played, and it plays something. I think a song. If I'm right, it plays a song that was special to them. It just kind of came to life, played a
Wow.
song, and then poof, went out of. It never worked again. And the guy who told this story, wrote this story. Again, he's a kind of literal type of hyper rational person. Doesn't believe in anything unless you can give it factualization of whatever that thing is that people pretend to do, um, that they call absolute science. But he himself had to say, well, I don't know what happened. I tried to take the damn radio apart. I could not figure this out.
Hmm.
I have to say that something like magically, the would the spirit of her uncle have come through the radio. So it's
Wow.
stuff like that. Yeah, it's these. It wasn't just I tried to not put my agenda and let people tell me something.
Hmm. Hmm.
And as such, the stories are very varied. So I should take a pause there. Did you have a question or a response to that?
Yeah. Well, this is all fascinating to me, but I wanted to also, you know, there's also a relationship, and you mentioned it about this folk singer that is a friend of yours, that there's musicians, a
Hmm.
lot of musicians that talk about having encounters, lots of them.
Yeah,
It's not, and I want to share this one fun story.
please.
This last year, I think it was in April. I can't remember exactly when, but I went on a music cruise, and there was Justin Hayward from the Moody Blues. There was the
Mhm.
Zombies. There was Graham
Cool.
Parsons. Uh, uh, I'm sorry, Alan Parsons, uh, and Al Stewart. All these really great,
Yeah.
musicians. It was so much fun, and then there was a lot of people that were, lesser names than those. But I was getting coffee on one of the mornings up, and there was someone playing music downstairs, and I was in like this upper balcony and pouring coffee, and I said to the guy next to me, I said, so that pot there is out of coffee, there's no coffee left in it. And he said, oh, thank you. And I look at him and I go, oh, I recognize you. And he's the drummer for the Zombies. This is a
Huh.
picture of him and I right here, and it's
Oh,
Steve
cool.
Rodford. Steve Rodford, his father, I can't remember his father's first name. Rodford is a very famous musician, but Steve was with the Zombies for many years. Of course, they're much older than him. I think Colin is close to 80, and his brother is like 83 or something. The Argents. But anyway, um, we got to talking, and he said, what do you do? And I said, well, I'm a fine art appraiser, antique appraiser, former auctioneer, that type of thing. But I do something kind of weird too, and I don't know what you're going to think about it, but I do a show on
Mhm.
UFOs. And he goes, oh my God. He said, I think we are meant to meet. And I said, really? And I said, why is that? He said, last night out in the Caribbean, out at sea, He said, I was out on the deck alone. They have, they have like specials above deck where nobody can get to them. They're, in upper decks.
Hmm.
He said he was out there alone, and all of a sudden he saw what he thought was a star come right down, sort of close to the water. And then all of a sudden it zigzagged a whole bunch of different directions and shot off. And he says,
Mm.
and I told everyone in the band, I said, you can't believe this crazy thing I just had happen. And I don't know who to talk to about it. And then I show up, a few hours later. So
Yeah, yeah.
he actually agreed to be on this show. And so I was going to just interview him about his encounter. It wasn't going to be just a little short clip. But then
Mm.
uh, Ron, Rod Argent, I believe it is. Rod Argent had a stroke, and so the whole band is on pause right now. So, but anyway,
Mm.
he just said he had his hands full, and he may talk someday. But so my question is to you: I'm sure you looked into this. That many known musicians talk
Hmm.
about having UFO. John Lennon, his son. I mean, all these different people have talked about
Yeah,
UFO encounters in the music world. So
yeah.
what do you
There's
know about
there's
any of that? Yeah.
I did look into it. There's a book called I think it's called Tuned In, and it's
Hmm.
stories. They're basically anecdotal stories about musicians like John Lennon, who he said, I was in New York City and right over there, I saw something and it wasn't a helicopter. I know what a helicopter looks like. And um, and it did, like you said, it's funny how they're like dream images. They zigzag, or they look like they move and act in ways that don't comport with everyday reality. They do something different. It's like the physics for those things. It's and you can theorize a million reasons why. Maybe they're multidimensional or something like that, or they're just coming.
Hmm.
They're operating on in a different way, um, probably in a way that's closer to magic or to shamanic reality. But yeah, it was interesting that you said that. I think musicians they're tuned into you're writing songs. You're getting you're in touch with the muse. You know, you're in touch. The muses were or goddesses, right? So you're in touch with the
Huh.
diamond, and that's not the daemon like as in demon. You're in touch with that thing that messengers between uh, the ineffable, the unknowable, and our reality. They're in touch readily, I think, with those things. I gave a book to Peter Rowan by Jeff Kripal. I'd read Jeff Kripal's when Peter and I were talking, and I was working on the book that I was writing about him. Um, I sent him Jeff Kripal's book, The Flip. And what Jeff in this book tries to do is it's written to really academics and materialists, people who, what they call scientism, people that believe in scientism, you kind of make science religion. If you can't explain it, you disregard it. Everything can be explained. I mean, and this comes from a long tradition. This comes from, uh, I think it was like even, in the 1875 or something. Um, one of the main scientists of the day was like, well, really, it's just a matter of working out the numbers. We understand everything now. Obviously, that wasn't true.
Hmm.
But this has predominated our academic, and it predominates our the mainstream. Most people feel that way. If I can't explain it in some way, if I don't have a scientific explanation that's rock solid, I don't want to talk about it. And anyway, I gave the book to Peter, and he goes, I like the book, but who's this written for? And then I said, it dawned on me. I said, of course, Peter gets songs from dakinis, from Hindu um, goddesses that he dreams. He's so much in touch with the other world. So yeah, I think musicians are by nature. I mean, of course, not all of them. Um, but the book that's called Tuned In, and it's a great book. I'm not at all disparaging it. It was anecdotes. So it was like
Hmm.
what John Lennon, or I actually have a story. Earl Grey Anderson.
Oh yeah.
And Earl gave me he wrote a blurb for the book, and he tells the story about Rick. Was it? No, it wasn't Rick Wakeman. Oh gosh, I'm losing it. It was the bass Chris Squire. Chris Squire had a UFO encounter, and he told Earl about that UFO encounter, and then he asked Earl. He said, "What do you think I saw?" And Earl said, "It was us from the future."
Hmm.
And Chris Squire goes, "Yeah, man, that sounds right, man." Apologies to my British friends, by the way, for my bad accent. But what I wanted to do in this book, Martin, was to not use anecdotes. I didn't want it to be anecdotal. I want it to be narrative. I wanted it to be stories. Some are mine. It had to be my stories. I had to lay out. Um, Really, what I'm doing is I'm speculating. I'm not making any grand claims. The fact is, Martin, we don't know where music comes from. We don't
Hmm.
know why we do music. We we don't we believe in the work and the research I did that music preceded the ability to sing, preceded the ability to talk.
Hmm.
So this, it would make sense. And
Yeah.
actually, birds sing, right? There are
Hmm.
primates that gorillas have. They hum
The
melodies.
whales sing.
Whales sing.
Hmm.
Yeah, there are many animals that do some form. They either create sound, but what whales and birds create melodies, unique melodies, and
Hmm.
they repeat them. That's the thing. And they actually, in birds, they repeat them, and then those melodies become like you're taught that the birds are taught that uh, by their parents,
Well, what
basically.
about the mockingbird?
The mockingbird, yeah,
It's
and it
it's
could,
learning from all of them. Yeah.
right, right.
Yeah.
But there's this thing, and I think it's so central, and I hadn't seen it anywhere. There is something in music, and I think I talk about it in the book. Maybe I listen to birds sing. If you go outside in the spring and you hear this symphony of birds,
Mm.
and they're different kinds of birds, and they seem to they're communicating. And I think to myself, maybe there's like some incredible physics being expressed. Maybe they're waiting for us to hear what they're trying to say. We're looking up here, we're looking up at
Hmm.
the stars, we're, destroying the planet, polluting the planet. We go about the things that we do so carelessly, not heeding, taking care of the planet. Just recognizing that we are, we are, we come from the soil. We, eat vegetables that are grown in the soil, that are nourished by the sun and the water, all terrestrial, all come from the earth. We are of the earth, and yet we see ourselves separate.
Hmm.
So one of the speculations I have in the book is that music it's a language that's trying to tell us something. It's trying to communicate something to us, like we said in Close Encounters. Bum, 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 bum.
And
You
this is
know,
all also math related.
right?
Music, and there's a relation to math with music, which
Absolutely.
I
It's
think is fascinating, that could be used in different ways. I'm just going to pop this up really quickly because
yeah,
here I was talking about seeing the Moody Blues, or one of
yeah,
them actually, and they had an encounter too.
mm,
So that there's an article I'm putting up, and I'll put that in the show notes. Uh,
yeah.
but anyway, I didn't want to get you off track on this thought, but
No,
I just wanted
no,
to
that's
post that
okay.
before I forgot.
That's okay. What I didn't want to do is I didn't want to get just like celebrity. So, I've done, because I'm
Hmm.
a journalist, I've done interviews with musicians, and I asked musicians, but it wasn't important to me to have the celebrity of a musician. It was more
Hmm.
about the story. And if,
Yes.
of course, if someone wants to give me a story, that's great, but I don't want an anecdote. It can't be a sentence. It would have to be a story. And I got them in different ways. Some were told to me, and I transcribed them, and then I, gave them back to the person. Some were written to me, but this was a massive collection of inputs, and then I edited them and tried to
Hmm.
create some continuity so that you're not reading this jumble of unrelated things. There are themes that occur throughout. by the way, the structure of the book is written. I break it down into the form of a polyphonic, like Palestrina wrote um, polyphonic choral music, and I broke it down into that structure. So,
Hmm.
and that's for giggles and fun. But I wanted it to have. It's as much about music as it is about the phenomena. And to me, music is just another contact modality. It's a way for us
Yeah.
to, like myth, to launch us into, unknown, the unknowable. It takes us into what Jung would call the collective unconscious, which other
Hmm.
people might call Akashic records. Um, some people feel that that exists outside your head. So it's not necessarily, it's
Well,
not that your body lives inside your mind, and we all live inside a collective mind. Um, and I'm kind of more on that. I kind of connect more with that idea, and I'm not claiming to have the absolute truth of it with a capital T. That's just what uh, I, I like this idea. I've been reading a lot of Bernardo Kastrup, who is very Jungian, very much interested in. He's what they call an idealist. So he is of the his philosophy is that we are not we don't have minds in our brains. It's really the we are in the mind. We are in a mind. Our brains are in the mind, our entire reality. And when
hmm.
you think about that on deep levels, you begin to understand. I don't want to go down so much that road. I'll just briefly touch on it. You can't think things without, you think things in the form of constructs.
Hmm.
And how were you raised? What culture did
Yeah.
you come from? What language did you speak?
Everything forms those opinions.
Right. And where, are you, which century are you from? What is the predominant science of the time?
Yeah.
What, did you come from, did you grow up in the Amazon, without all of these technology trappings and so forth? Are you from, wherever you're from, it forms how you see the world. It's just unavoidable.
That's right. Yeah.
And
I've got a, I rarely, or I don't even know if I've ever gone this woo woo before, but I'm going to go a little woo woo here.
please,
Uh, you hear, when you hear these amazing songs, and I don't mean just songs, I mean melodies, I mean, classical music or whatever, just so amazing. You just can't understand all the complexities of them. Um, and then you hear about people talking about downloads.
hmm
It's almost like you makes you wonder. That's where I'm going, where real woo woo here. It makes you wonder sometimes, how can the human brain actually create these things without some outside help?
I
You
mean, Paul
know?
McCartney says he dreamt the song yesterday, fully intact, fully intact. He said he woke
Yeah.
up, he had to just get down and I think he recorded it or something. And how amazing is that? And then he said to his bandmates, have you heard this song before? Is this something? Am I copying this? And he's not
Hmm.
the only one. It's not. It's something. The double helix was conceived in a dream. Um, you know, it
Well, mushrooms
it's
too.
funny
There's
because
people that have written some
yeah,
wonderful songs on mushrooms. I mean, people have actually admitted that.
absolutely,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, you're doing what I said at the outset. You're kind of cracking that like literal container that we see ourselves in, and
Hmm.
I think that we, in the mainstream culture and science, we've kind of cut ourselves off from that collective unconscious. It's just the unconscious, the notion we think we're in control. We think the ego is
Yeah.
kind of running the ship, but the fact is it's not. I
It's
mean, the more
not.
you think about it, there are forces, that are there are unconscious things that we do that have a tremendous control over us. And I think music is one of the last refuge of where we can go, and everyone goes there, into this you know other realm, this imaginative realm. And it could be anything from imagining, remembering, having a memory from an emotional memory, or you're wrapped up in your imagination in some way, or it could be extraordinary. It could be way beyond that. And you talk about mushrooms. I mean, listen to the Allman Brothers on mushrooms. You're in for something big time. You're going to go down that, you're going to go that big blue ocean of
Mm.
consciousness, and it's going to take you somewhere. What Blake called double vision, this ability to see, perceive greater depth. Um, and this all ties up with the UFO phenomena because it isn't just one thing. People have they have Marian apparitions, they have visitations of some kind, they have near-death experiences. Um, they have a psychedelic experience. These things cohere, and the UFO is a kind of, to me, and they also have UFO experiences. And I don't doubt that they have their actual knock on. You can knock on that object, and it's a physical thing, it's there. But I think it's both physical and psychic. And just from all the readings I've done, these things occur. There's some kind of telepathic thing that's occurring when it's happening. There's some kind of other communication. Often people do have, not only, but they do have and have recorded music when they're having an encounter. They may hear this kind of celestial. They'll often say, what I've heard and read in some of these accounts are in the story, the most beautiful, kind of incredibly beautiful music. Like the sound of this symphony orchestra that was so gorgeous and indescribable and emotional. And so, that's really where I was going, is to try to capture some of that, to not be so literal, to not let my agenda kind of put such a thumbprint on it that it's so heavy, and I've forced people to give me what I wanted them to say. I mean, oftentimes I didn't really tell people too much about the premise. I just gave them the premise of, can you tell me a story about something that is inexplicable, that relates to music?
Mm.
And then there it went. Some of them had, in very detailed. They were very UFO specific, and some were not.
Hmm.
Um, and I did a lot of research, Martin, in this book, because I wanted to. One thing about the UFO, and I'm not disparaging anyone. I'm not a one-trick pony. I don't just do, you know, UFO only and just give me only this. I did research in mythology. I did research in musicology. I did anthropological research, read books that I incorporate into this. The music that I talk about comes from all cultures. It comes from Africa. It comes from, Renaissance music. I talked about rock and roll, jazz, bluegrass. So it wasn't like a one thing that I'm trying to say here.
Hmm.
I tried to get voices from. I talked to people from Australia. I talked to people from Italy, people from England. It really is all over the world. And I'm not saying that this was complete. All I did is I just had some interactions with a limited group of people, and I'm saying something that's narrow. And I hope that someone takes the mantle and says, this is Jeff Kripal felt this was a worthwhile pursuit. Because I said, do you think I'm going down the wrong road here? What do you think, Jeff? And he said, no, this is something you should explore. And you're uniquely qualified because you're a musical journalist, you're a musician. Um, so I hope at the end of the day, I think people will they'll read some good stories. They'll be in for surprises. It won't be page after page of the same thing. You're going to be surprised by each chapter and what follows.
Wow, very interesting. Well, so we have actually just 5 minutes right on the money left. But
Cool.
not to go sidetracking a little, but I just thought
Sure.
this was very interesting when I watched something, a documentary on it, and then I read about it afterwards. Ecstasy, MDMA. People, when they're influenced on that, and they look at, like, I believe some type of low volume laser or whatever, they see digits and letters. And
Hmm.
they did this experiment with many, many people. I mean, it's just another weird part of our reality. that
Hmm.
doesn't really seem on the outside to make any sense.
I,
I
I
don't know.
I I read about that, and also what's interesting is John Hopkins, Berkeley, NYU, they now have psychedelic research institutes that
Hmm.
what they're very interested in is was DMT, particularly. Have you had alien encounters? And they're very
Yes.
interested to talk because people do, and there's a
Yes.
trajectory, particularly say with DMT. There's a kind of there's a guy doing research on this, Andrew Gallimore, very interesting research. And what he says is the DMT universe, it exists independently of us. And I talk about that in this book too. So it's not in your mind. When you now I've never done DMT, but when you
Me
take
neither.
DMT,
Yeah.
but it's serious research. There's tons of interesting work going on, but it's not like you're say with mushrooms, you're going to have an experience that transforms the reality around you. So you're now co-creating in a much more rich way the reality around you on a mushroom experience. But on DMT, you go somewhere. That world exists. Those people exist. They kind of welcome you back. Hey, Martin, come on over here. Let me show you this incredibly complex geometrical structure that I'm making. And it's this mind-blowing, kind of architecture and, like you said, mathematics and all these extraordinary things that they seem to be wanting to give to us to teach us.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I have a colleague that's in the art and appraisal world, very kind of a straight arrow. I was really kind of surprised. I did tell her that I do a show on, UFOs and things like that. She goes, "Oh, that's interesting. I know we're not alone and all that." That was our conversation basically. Then one day she tells me she did, is it DMT or something with, um, this is up in Maine, with someone that helped her through it. Like I don't know why she wanted to do it, but I think maybe there's some stress in her life or whatever, trying to resolve that. And she calls me up and she says, "I can't believe I met an alien." She says, "Now I would never," she goes, I just can't even believe these words are coming out of my mouth. But she goes, and I just feel 100% certain that I met an alien." And I
Yeah.
thought, wow, I mean, so there's an example right there. And I was kind of surprised she did anything like that to begin with. But
Did
anyway,
they I don't know if you're, just they're doing a lot of research on people with PTSD, people who have suffer from alcoholism.
mhm.
There seems to be psychedelics seem to be a tool that helps people recover. I think actually the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, I think was a friend of Aldous Huxley, and he took LSD, and it brings something that helps people recover from stress or from to break out of a pattern of like PTSD, for example,
Mm.
and by having a kind of revelation, an extraordinary experience. But the amount of the success rate is so high, you can't deny it, and that's why the research institutes are actually getting funding and doing serious research with it.
Wow. So I can't believe it, but we are out of time. So please tell us where we can get your book.
You can get it anywhere you can buy books. UFO Symphonic. You go to Amazon. You can pre-order it. I do have some copies if you're interested. I have some that are used for reviewers and podcasters like Martin, but I do have some. You can go to MikeFiorito.com, and if you want to contact me, or you can just go wherever you like to buy books.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. You're a great guest as always.
Thank you for having me,
Okay.
Martin. It's always great to be here.
You bet. Take care.
Take care.
All right, everyone. So we'll be back next week with my good friend, Dean Aliotto, and have a wonderful new year and a wonderful 2025. And always keep your eyes to the sky.